Hello and welcome to episode 3 of my guide to Final Fantasy XIV Online. In the last episode we discussed the Hotbar, the PlayStation 4 Hotbar, and an approach to organising and assigning different skills and abilities regardless really of the class that you choose. In the first episode I had suggested that you choose one of 3 classes if you were a complete beginner, and that was the Archer, the Lancer or the Thermotag. In this episode we're going to be looking at combat, and I'm going to show you 2 different jobs. So the class, the description for a class that's evolved over level 30. One is at maximum level, and that is the Bard, as you can see here, and she's charmed to meet you. And the other class will be a tanking class. There's something for beginners to consider later on after they've maxed out one of the 3 initial classes I had suggested. And that'll be to demonstrate a melee approach to combat. So we're going to look at a ranged approach to combat and a melee approach to combat. Now combat, of course, is extremely important for most classes in Final Fantasy. All classes of war that is, so everything other than the craftsman have some way of attacking. Healers, however, have very limited combat abilities, so I won't be looking at healers. I'll be discussing healers later on in a different episode. But for the time being we're just going to concentrate on that. So I'm going to bring up the HUD, and as you can see we're in Kalusha, which is one of the Shadowbringers environments. Absolutely huge environment. They're all beautiful and they really extend the repertoire of areas in the game. And hopefully I won't be annihilating everything too quickly, because this character already has quite a lot of the best end game equipment. And the great thing of Final Fantasy XIV is everybody can get the best end game equipment. There is a system of collecting and earning tokens of different descriptions, but I will be talking about different currencies. So if you look at your R2 button and currency, you will see that the game has lots of different currencies there that are used to purchase different things, and we'll be discussing that in a later episode. So let's get to it. I'm going to bring up my mount. This mount I got from Beast Tribe quests. It's something you will be introduced to later on. I may cover them later on, but they're quite self-explanatory and they do use a token system. So maybe I'll discuss that in a later episode, or maybe I'll leave that for you to discover. So let's go down here. I will, however, talk about, if I have time in this episode, how to get your first mount and what you will need to do that. The first thing also is make sure that my sidekick here, this Chocobo, is going to hang around. So let's look first before we take on this Cliff Kite. As you can see, my R1 set is chock-a-block full of different spells, and the set 4 that I discussed in the last episode. The set 4 here has all of those long-term cooldowns, and especially with the Bard class we have different abilities there that boost not only yourself but other players in your party. So very useful multiplayer and single player, and this is why the Bard is one of the best soloing classes. So I will also be discussing potions and food in a little bit, but let's do the combat first. So the approach here, obviously with ranged, you want range. Great thing about the archers and the bards is they can use their skills while they're moving. Again, that sprint button I discussed in the last episode is going to be really handy later on. So let's begin. So the first thing that you can do is, if you're either holding down the L2 or R2 ready to cast a spell, you can, and it's probably more instinctive to use L2 for this, you can use the R1 button and the left button if there's another target nearby, you see, left and right, to target the creature you're going to be gunning for. And you need to target them to initiate combat, otherwise nothing will happen. If I deselect and then try and do something, see, it's saying there's nothing here. What are you trying to hit? I will be opening up with Stormbite and then usually followed with Caustic Bite. Why? Because those two spells do damage over time. So those we call damage over time spells and abilities dots. And you want to get your dots on at the beginning of a fight, because those are going to continue to do damage to the creature as the fight continues. And what you'll see is in the top under the HP and magic point bars, you'll see the Cliff Kite bar there, and you'll see Stormbite and Caustic Bite become two little squares underneath that Cliff Kite name as they're applied. This is exactly the same when something afflicts you. You'll see under the HP and magic point bars there, in the center of the screen, some little boxes will appear indicating what you've been afflicted with. So let's do this, and I'll try and describe it as best I can. So I'm going to open up, hit with the Stormbite and the Caustic. So my two dots are now on. I'm moving around. This burst shot, which is triangle, is my main attack, and then I have a special shot there that comes available occasionally. So those kind of abilities where you saw the square highlighted are only available at certain points, and many classes have those, but you want to equip them in useful places because they will become available. They proc is the correct terminology, so they have a random kind of generation to them, and when they appear we say they proc. So you're waiting for those abilities to proc because they're particularly powerful. So let's just do another one, and that's quite quick, and I am going through them quite quickly. So I have to be in range. You'll see that if I'm out of range, there's loads of X's over the boxes because it's saying they're not in range. So open again, hit the two dots, and then I have another special ability here called Shadow Bite, which gets more powerful if there are two dots. And under the name Cliff Kite, you'll see those two boxes ticking down. That is Stormbite and Caustic Bite working. Go, here we are, arrow here, that's a nice little ability in a nice place, and boom. So you can see that the way that I've organized these bards' abilities are instinctive or easy for me. Easy for me. That doesn't mean they're going to be easy for you, but they're easy for me to know where they are and I can use them. So let's try and find a different opponent, because what I want to actually demonstrate too is something called AoE, and that's quite important. Let's pick on these Psychonias, however you pronounce that, and see if they have an AoE ability. I'm not sure if they do or not. We'll find out. I actually opened up with Bloodletter then, and I'm going to put my dots in and see if I can tempt them into doing an AoE attack. There! Did you see this? You see that glowing area? see if we can get him to do it again before I kill him. Probably not on this one. Sorry, my character is hard as nails, even though... There, you saw it again. So let's do another one, just to demonstrate that again. Because this is really important. If you're a beginner, you really need to pay attention to this, even though it's fairly straightforward. Let's see if we can get him to do that again. I'll just stand there and take it for a bit. There. Once you see any area like that, get out of it. If you're a magic user and you're casting a spell and that appears, it's a bit of a gamble if you stay in it to finish the spell. So the best advice is to stop casting the spell and get out. Those areas that are highlighted like that are especially dangerous to you. And when you're starting out, that really could be the end of you. That could kill you off really quickly. And you won't have a chocobo companion, which I'll cover in another episode. How to make them into a companion, and they won't have any skill, you know, you won't have them, and they have skills to heal and things if that's what you want. So let's switch class, and switching class now, I can also now talk a little bit more about the hotbar settings, as I covered in the last episode. So if we go... Once you get to a certain level 10 I think it is, you can start using gear sets. And when you come into your character screen, as you can see, it was there on the R2 set, triangle, you can start forming with a create a new gear set, new gear sets for different classes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch to my paladin, which is the tank class, which starts off as a gladiator, and the job, so the class is a gladiator and then the job becomes a paladin. We'll equip that, and for those who are observant who know Final Fantasy, that is a Final Fantasy XIII look, that is the epic lightning look. And now, you see I don't have the right gear set on, do I? Because that was for the bard. So what I can do now is I can go to character configuration, which I showed you all of this, and when you start a new character, all you need to do is you click out of this, you click out of hotbar 1, because that would be assigned to a character already, and then you choose another hotbar, which effectively becomes hotbar 1 if you follow. Hotbar 2, though, stays where it is, because that is already set up for you and you don't need to worry about it. And once you've done that, apply, and back over here, if you remember, when we set this up, you do the same thing with the same hotbar number. When you click out, you'll see that what would have been set 1 now, which I've replaced with set 5, are a completely new range of abilities, but set 2 remains the same. Interestingly enough, you don't have to worry about set 4, because set 4 will change anyway. So I'm now going to show you the approach with a melee class. Obviously melee classes have to go in, they can't fire from a distance, but most melee classes have some form of stun ability. With tanks, the reason I don't really suggest them for a beginner is because you really need to know, at least minimally, all the dungeons and raids and multiplayer events going on, and kind of all of the mechanics going on in them. And the best way really of observing and learning those is via a DPS role. So when you go in as a tank, you're not going to be going in blind. At times you will be, but the tank is, you know, there is a skill to it, and you have to kind of really take charge and know what you're doing quite well, even though they take an awful lot of damage. But this approach would be the same for any melee DPS. So the Lancer and the Pugilist would also kind of approach it this way. You have to go in close. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in close and I'm going to whack it with a shield bash. And then I'm going to use some of my cooldowns to reduce damage. And then I'm going to go into my main combat abilities, which are there again. Same as they were with the Bard. Here on the shape buttons on L2. So here we go. Bash. That stuns it. And I'm going to hit those, which give me no defense. Slam it with this one. And then you'll see that I have a combination there. So when I... now what happened there? Yeah, get out of the way. You'll see those three, triangle, circle, and X, are hit in a combination. Some character classes and jobs require combinations to be really effective. And then I'll finish off with some lightning, as I am lightning. So with DPS classes in particular, you often have combinations of buttons to use, and that will also guide you on how to organize them on the action bar. Right, so that's the difference between DPS and range to a certain extent. And then I'm going to go back to the Bard. And again, because I've switched over, I come back to System Character Configuration and hit that, get rid of that, hit that, get rid of that. And then I'm back to where I was. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll leave potions and food for the next episode, and I will also talk about how to get your first mount. And that is the basics of combat dealt with. I will be going into much more advanced combat tactics later on in the series, but for now, take care.